In China, those seen to be challenging the government quickly feel the heavy hand of state security.
The Chinese government has two tools to manipulate the people. One is violence, brutality. The other is propaganda.
Now, democratic countries warn China is carrying out its system of control and censorship worldwide.
The biggest issue of our time, in my view, is China.
For the first time, the FBI and CIA accuse China of using a global web of spies and informants to harass, intimidate, and neutralize anyone daring to speak out. I'm Steve Chow. On this episode of 101 East, we ask how far will China go to silence its critics? Toronto, Canada is a world away from China. When democracy activist Sheng Xue fled here seeking asylum, she believed she was finally free from the watchful eye of Chinese authorities. Now she says she was wrong.
I thought that I escaped from the fear and I was going to enjoy the freedom, human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. But I realized that they are here. Their people, their network, their power, everything here.
Xue became one of China's loudest critics after witnessing the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre, where Chinese leaders ordered the killing of thousands of student democracy demonstrators. Her relentless activism quickly won her international acclaim and China's attention. She says Chinese agents contacted her repeatedly, warning they were tracking her every movement. They threatened to kill her if she didn't stop criticizing China's leaders. She began getting late-night visits to her home.
One time about 1:30, I was working on my computer and I saw a car just passing by. It's okay, but then the car coming back and then make a turns in our driveway. So I was very nervous. I said, 1:30, why? No, why a car is around here? Then some days after, again about 2 o'clock, a car goes by our driveway and even stopped at our front. And then I said to my husband, I'm scared. Yeah, I want to show you this.
The intimidation also went online. Xue was targeted by a vicious smear campaign.
This is a Photoshop.
Her face has been pasted onto hundreds of lurid photos and then posted to escort sites, along with her phone number and address.
They said that I was working for nightclub and I was offering sex service. I receive hundreds of phone calls per day.
There are also tens of thousands of online postings accusing her of fraud and questioning her integrity.
I'm a liar and I stolen money from our humanitarian actions and I'm very ugly, I'm very, it's everything. What you could think about a person is bad, everything.
The sheer volume of material makes her believe the Chinese government is behind the attacks.
So when you started seeing all these accusations, all these nude photos, them calling you a prostitute, How did that affect you?
Do you need to ask?
It hasn't been easy. Hi, Mr. Chen.
I'm meeting an insider who knows how China's system of control works. Chen Yoglin helped build the country's strategy of crushing dissent abroad. Later, as a high-level diplomat, he put those policies into practice.
Most Chinese immigrants are still scared. Most, because they know the Chinese regime may go to extreme means.
Since defecting to Australia, Chen speaks openly, saying there are no limits to what China will do to its critics.
If they get involved in any anti-communist group, they will definitely be harmed. No bottom line at all, not at all, beyond extreme.
There are many who say nowhere is safe, even in the land of freedom and liberty. Teng Biao was one of China's most prominent civil rights lawyers. He fled to New York in 2014, but he says he hasn't escaped China's reach.
Hey, Teng Biao.
Hi, Steve.
Hi. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see
It's been
you.
a long time.
Yeah.
I first met Teng Biao years ago in Beijing, when he was a lawyer defending the rights of those persecuted by the state. Today, he continues to speak out against injustices in China.
So I want to show you this.
It's led to threats on his life.
His ID is CCP forever, Chinese Communist Party forever.
And what does it say?
Teng Biao, take care of your life because you will be murdered.
They actually said murdered.
Yeah.
You will be murdered.
Teng Biao believes the Twitter account belongs to a known agent of China's state security.
What went through your mind when you saw this?
It's a direct threat to my life. I live in the United States and it's a free and democratic country, but I can still feel the threat and harassment from Chinese government.
Since Chinese leader Xi Jinping assumed power in 2012, Teng Biao says he's witnessed an increasing crackdown on dissent. Before he fled, he was seized by authorities and tortured 3 times.
I was kidnapped by Chinese secret police. I didn't know where I was detained. And then I was physically tortured. They beat me. The hardest part of this experience is not the physical torture, but the uncertainty. So I didn't know, I had no idea how they would treat me the next hour, next day. I didn't know what they would do.
After Teng Biao left China, authorities turned their attention to his family, refusing to let them leave the country. Fearing they too would be jailed or even tortured, he devised a dangerous plan to get them out.
We decided to smuggle them out. So my wife and my daughter escaped China to Burma and Thailand, and then Laos, and then Thailand again. So it's really risky.
Teng Biao's experience is not unique. He's documented more than 100 cases he says proves China is spreading its system of control and intimidation globally. He compares China's actions to Nazi Germany.
Some people may think it's unfair to compare China to Nazi Germany, but the current system in China is really close to totalitarianism. The secret police, one-party rule, the total control of society. And internationally, China becomes more and more aggressive.
And now he says China is trying to exert that control on top American institutions.
When I was a visiting scholar at Harvard Law School, I was invited by American Bar Association to write a book to discuss China's legal system, political system, and society through my own experience.
But a month later, Teng Biao says the Bar Association abruptly scrapped the deal. Publicly, the ABA says it didn't think the book would sell. But Teng Biao received an email from the group offering a different explanation.
The reason they gave me via email is they don't want to anger Chinese government.
When they said that to you, what did you think?
I think it's really ridiculous. In China, because of my human rights activities, I was banned from teaching. I was disbarred. I was kidnapped and disappeared and tortured. And the American is the model of liberal democracy, freedom of speech. And ABA helped Chinese government to marginalize me, to silence me.
Today, Teng Biao is meeting with other exiled activists to hear their stories. But only a few show up. Those who do explain their friends are too afraid to speak openly.
中共的这个手伸的是非常长。
海外民运的人数，参加坚持下来的人数持续减少，这个和中共的打压有关吗？有关。
Everyone here has had family jailed or threatened in China.
当地的国安也去找过他们，就是想要了解我的情况。
For Wen-Yun Chao, a well-known Chinese blogger, the threat has been much closer.
就在 New York 的 Queens， 我儿子在上学路上的照片，中共当局拍了这个照片，他就告诉我，他们随时可以对我家孩子施加不利，传达这种信息，来迫使我就范。
Do you feel safe in the Western world?
有很多眼睛在盯着你。
不会说在美国是绝对安全的。
Or safe anywhere. The group points out several outspoken critics, like Swedish citizen Gui Minhai, have disappeared from Southeast Asia, kidnapped, they say, by Chinese authorities.
我认为我们所期盼的这个情况还会恶化，我们这个反共的异议人士的空间，我认为只会继续恶化，我们的空间只会被打压。
Adding to their fears is a belief Western leaders are only interested in trade with China and not in defending human rights. They see the tone of Trump's meetings with China's leader as proof.
We have developed a friendship, I can see that, and I think long term we're going to have a very, very great relationship, and I look very much forward to it.
川普对中共的一个施压是贸易上的，我不得不怀疑他这种对人权的姿态会不会只是为了谋取更大的经济利益上面的一个对方的一个妥协。
But recently in Washington, congressional hearings reveal rising concerns over China.
I do believe that Russia, Vladimir Putin in particular's efforts around the world are very important, but the biggest issue of our time, in my view, is China and the risks they pose. I'm not sure in the 240-some-odd-year history of this nation we've ever faced a competitor and potential adversary of this scale, scope, and capacity.
One of the things we're trying to do is view the China threat as not just a whole-of-government threat, but a whole-of-society threat. It is something that we're watching warily.
One of the most pressing threats, says the FBI, is on American campuses. At the University of Massachusetts in Boston, we're invited to a Chinese New Year's celebration put on by the Confucius Institute. China spends an estimated $10 billion a year running 500 of these centers in universities globally, staffing them with Chinese government-approved teachers. The institutes teach students Chinese culture and language. But Chinese government defector Chen Yoglin says they are tools for propaganda and censorship.
On campus, on the whole society, it can build up friendly network to China. They can influence the future generations of the Western countries. Politically sensitive topics are banned. Topics like Falun Gong, democracy and freedom, human rights in China, all banned.
It's a charge organizers here deny.
What do you say about the concerns of censorship and concerns that the Confucius Institute is just an arm of the Chinese government?
They really do not have the right information about us. Every Confucius Institute is working to be a bridge between US and China. We have nothing to do with the Chinese government censorship.
Outside, protesters have a different view.
I find it outrageous that a foreign government, especially one like the Chinese government, which is one of the most oppressive regimes in the world, is dictating and deciding what American students are learning on campus.
Every university that agrees to host a Confucius Institute must sign a contract with the Chinese government. After weeks of requests, the protesters got hold of UMass Boston's deal. It reveals a clause that worries them. The institute must adhere to Chinese law.
What is your concern with the contract that the University of Massachusetts has signed with the Confucius Institute?
I'm shocked to see UMass Boston, a state institution, is agreeing to follow rules and regulations of Chinese Communist Party and compromising people's freedom of speech in this country.
It's just showing that the Chinese government soft power is rising year by year, and it's very scary.
With the Confucius Institute supplying millions of dollars to UMass Boston, we ask a senior school official what impact that has on the teaching here.
Can students talk about the 1989 Tiananmen massacre? Can they talk about human rights violations in Tibet?
I would assume that in their classes that they're having that are on those topics that they can talk about those issues. I think that that's kept quite separate from the type of ideas that we see the Confucius Institute undertaking.
With the agreement with the Confucius Institutes, does that mean that there is a degree of censorship?
I think I'd have to research it a little more. So if you understand what I mean, I feel like we're getting into a territory that I need to understand a little bit more what you're questioning me about.
Last week I wrote a letter about the Confucius Institutes, which are funded by Chinese government dollars at U.S. schools. And it is my view that they're complicit in these efforts to covertly influence public opinion and to teach half-truths designed to present Chinese history, government, or official policy in the most favorable light.
The CIA and FBI
we put the question of covert influence and intimidation to Chinese authorities.
What do you say to these accusations?
对于那些无端的、没有任何事实根据的指责呢，我们实在是不想浪费时间去做回应。我们希望的是，有关各方呢都能够真正的摒弃冷战的和零和博弈的思维，能够以开放包容的心态来看待彼此的关系，来看待当今世界的发展。
Back in New York, we meet up again with blogger Wenyun Chao. In 2016, he says he was writing commentary critical of China when he became the target of one of the largest online attacks ever recorded on an individual in the U.S.
1个小时2个 G， 一天就将近100个 G。
The volume of incoming data shut down the internet in his New York neighborhood.
他们的攻击把整个 Oakland Garden， 就是前后将近10条街，这边过去将近10条街，这个网络全部攻击垮掉了。
是吗？
那么大的地方，
你可以想象一下他们的攻击强度有多大。
It was so big, the FBI's cyber unit took notice.
甚至对我家庭网络的攻击都引起了美国政府方面的注意，并且他们也主动来跟我询问发生了什么事情。
After facing a number of such attacks, Wen Yunqiao was called before Congress to testify.
我认为攻击方含有政治目的，攻击水平非常高，极有可能来自于政府背景的行为。
Following the testimony, Wen says U.S. authorities expressed concern for his safety.
美国政府方面也曾经询问过我需不需要给我提供特殊的保护，我说不用，但是我发现我家附近的警车的巡逻的次数明显多了很多，并且有一辆警车经常停在我家的附近。
When the cyber attacks didn't stop Wen Yunqiao's writing, he says Chinese authorities grabbed his parents and younger brother.
生气说不上，是一种很无奈的感觉。我没想到他们用那么糟糕的手段来对付我，这个。
Wen sent details of the attack to a specialized cyber unit at the University of Toronto. The Citizen Lab is a group of anti-hackers who expose state-sanctioned cyber espionage.
So here we are based in Canada, but we've done reports on just about every region of the world, including a lot on China.
Ron Diebert leads the group.
There's no doubt in my mind that the Chinese government is, I would say, relentless in terms of its targeting of civil society groups abroad that they consider to be adversaries.
Over the past decade, Diebert says he's watched China become more sophisticated in controlling the online sphere.
Here is a Canadian-based account of WeChat, one of the most popular social media chat applications that's based in China.
He and his team demonstrate how China blocks information of sensitive topics from being shared globally.
So if I say something regular like hello in English, it'll get through just fine, and you would be able to see that. If I switch to Chinese input,
he then types in the name of a religious group banned in China.
Falun Dafa. I send it.
Nothing appears on my device. So if we're having a conversation and it just doesn't appear, that's a really insidious form of censorship.
The Citizen Lab has uncovered tens of thousands of words and phrases that are blocked.
There are certain categories that are almost always filtered. Falun Gong, Tiananmen Square, anything Tibet related, things to do with human rights.
And it's not just text.
In a context like China, people try to circumvent censorship by sending pictures or caricatures. And what we have found is that there is targeting of images in messaging applications.
Again, they show us how this works.
I select a controversial photo, such as this one of Xi Jinping. Now the photo will show up, but maybe about 10 or so seconds, the photo will get deleted. It's gone.
Researchers here have never seen this type of censorship software in action before. Diebert says it's stopping the free flow of opinion online.
I'm pretty pessimistic about the landscape overall and the trend lines. If you look at some of the core elements of liberal democracy and how they're being subtly eroded, and how alternative models that are non-democratic are actually flourishing in the current communications environment, it really gives me pause. It makes me greatly concerned.
The Cold War has never stopped.
With his insider's knowledge, Chen says China sees itself at war with the West, a war of ideology that it believes it can win.
The Chinese care more about if China is superpower, is control. That's what China care. China care about its position, its power.
For Teng Biao, his greatest fear is what could happen to his children.
It's possible the Chinese government, Chinese secret police will harass, intimidate my children, and even attack them. It's possible. But I think it's of no use to live in fear. So I'll try my best to protect them.
Teng Biao says rather than bow to China, the West needs to stand up for freedom and human rights. But until they do, he says brave individuals will continue the fight, no matter the sacrifice.
There are always activists and heroes willing to sacrifice themselves to speak out, to fight against these atrocities and the dictatorship. So for a long run, democracy and human dignity will prevail.